Hi, I'm Jeremiah Gibbs. I'm your Camino guide. Over the years, I've led more than 90 pilgrims on more than 18,000 miles of Camino de Santiago. And today I'm here to tell you about reserving hostels and whether you should or shouldn't reserve a hostel and what you might want to go about, how you might want to best do that. So I think before we get into how to do that, I think the best question is why or should I reserve a hostel? And I think there's probably two reasons that you might want to reserve. One reason would be if you are going to be traveling with a group, and here I mean probably more than 2 people or 3 people. If you're going to be traveling in a group of 6 or 7 pilgrims, then you're probably going to want to reserve your hostels because oftentimes it can be difficult to find a number of beds in the same place. So that might be a good reason to reserve if you've got a group of people who are going to walk together and stay together. I lead large pilgrimages, and so often I have to reserve all of our hostels because that's just a necessity if you're going to keep a group together on Camino, because often when you arrive there, there may only be 1 or 2 beds or 3 beds in any particular building or any particular albergue. So you're probably going to want to reserve if you've got a group. Second reason that you might want to reserve is if you are someone who's going to get worried and anxious about whether you're going to find a bed, and if that's going to be like something that you're going to be spending your day thinking about, then that's just a disruption for your Camino. If you feel better about having a place to stay and knowing where you're going and having a plan like that, if that then frees you up to be able to enjoy the rest of the day, enjoy your meals, enjoy your conversations because you're not worried about where you're going to sleep tonight, and that's a great reason to reserve a stay at an albergue or hostel, because then you're going to be able to really enjoy your Camino without thinking about those things. What's the reason you would not reserve a hostel or not reserve an albergue? And my suggestion for most people in most Caminos, I would suggest don't even reserve at all, because usually you're going to find a bed where you're going. In the busiest seasons and the closer that you get to Santiago, it becomes more and more necessary to reserve a bed. But if you can help not reserving a bed, then I would recommend not reserving one, because oftentimes you can have more freedom to simply enjoy the pilgrimage and to not feel like you have to get to a certain destination. Stop where you want to stop, walk on if you want to walk on. If a friend decides that you meet someone, you want to spend some time with them, and they decide to go on to the next town, then you can go on to the next town without worrying about whatever reservations that you've made. So I certainly think that sort of the spirit of Camino is probably to not be reserved, and I suggest it. But if you are in one of those other 2 categories, then definitely just reserve your place, and I think you'll enjoy that much better. So we've talked a little bit about why you might want to reserve, but I think then the question becomes how you might reserve. Well, there's 2 ways that I would recommend. There are other ways to do this. There are other ways to make these reservations, but there are 2 ways that I would recommend doing it. The first one would be using a guidebook or whatever method you're going to use, and I'll give one suggestion in a moment, but using a guidebook, you can just write emails to hostel owners, albergue owners, because sometimes the language barrier is easier if you have a chance maybe to plug some things into Google Translate. Sometimes Google Translate will do a good enough job to get contact with somebody via email, or they can then do a translation app or find someone who can translate your email. And usually it's a little bit easier to have communication via email than it is over the phone. If you're a Spanish speaker, then definitely just call up and make your reservations over the phone. That's always going to be the easiest. But if you're not a Spanish speaker, then probably emailing albergue owners is going to be the easiest way to make a reservation. The other thing about that is that most of our public hostels and public albergues, I'm using the word hostel here in a way that we don't use it in Spain, by the way. So usually we would refer to albergues as these accommodations which have multiple people in the same room usually. And those are what Americans would often call hostels, but in Spain, hostel is a little bit different. Usually has private rooms and things like that. So when I use the terms hostel and albergue interchangeably, I'm talking about these rooms that have multiple people in the same room, and that's kind of the most common way to stay on Camino. And these albergue owners, the private ones, are usually willing to reserve. So you don't even want to try to call to reserve publicly owned albergues usually, because oftentimes they're not going to be willing to reserve. And most guidebooks are going to tell you whether somebody is an albergue is willing to reserve or not. So the next way that you might consider making reservations at albergues is going to be using the Wise Pilgrim iOS app or Android app. These Wise Pilgrim apps are excellent guidebooks, and usually you can just download them to your phone. If you plan on taking your phone with you to Spain anyway, then this is a no weight, meaning you don't have any additional weight to carry in your bag, way of having a good guidebook. And also there's some mapping in there, so sometimes it helps to be able to find out exactly where you are if you don't really know where you are or whatever. And I'm just going to show you real quickly here. If I just click on León, and it will take me to this León region, and you can see each city. And if I just want to click on, I'm going to click on León in particular, one of the larger cities. You'll see here that Booking.com is actually integrated into the Wise Pilgrim app, and I'm able then to just click on reserve a bed on Booking, and it's automatically going to kick me over to León, and then it's going to show, it's going to only highlight places in León. If I say that I have, so let's say 2 adults, and I want to search in León, then you'll see that it's going to come up with lots of different results. And what I usually do if I want to only get the albergues, because that's going to be your cheapest accommodation, is then I just adjust it so it says price the lowest. And then it's going to bring up albergues only. So you'll see here in this particular albergue, it tells me it's near the León city center. So that's going to be near the cathedral. I know that because I've been there, but you might have to look it up if you don't know. It's going to tell me there's an albergue here that's $30 for 2 beds. That's not a great price, but it's not a bad price. Usually a private albergue is around 10 euros, which is going to be a little more than $20. So you can see there's some other hostels and albergues that are going to show up right here in the Wise Pilgrim app. I'm doing this, and I'm actually looking in February. If I were to look out further, I'm doing this during the middle of the COVID pandemic, and so a lot of these albergues don't even have places in here to show right now. But if you were looking at those during the middle of a regular Camino year, there'll be a lot more of those places right there in the Booking.com app that you can be able to make reservations within the actually within the app will kick you out to the Booking.com site so that you can make those reservations on the Booking site. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions about how and whether you should reserve your hostels or your albergues, then certainly ask those in the comments, and I'll be glad to answer questions as they come up. I really would prefer if I took all of my Caminos without reservations, because that's my personality and that's what I love about Camino, but oftentimes it's simply a necessity based on your situation. So I hope that this will be helpful for you to be able to do that when you need to.